Hello. Here we are at the top of the hexagram of gate 10, the gate of treading, the gate of the behavior of the self. And the sixth line is, of course, called the role model, because the 10th gate gives us the names for all of our profile lines. The 10-6 are some of the most self-conscious people you will meet. They're constantly under pressure, constantly self-concerned about the nature of their behavior. Built into them is the understanding that their behavior can be hypocritical. They recognize that. This line is called the role model. It's a very powerful line. The lifetime learning says the perfect expression of the norms through action rather than words. They learn their self-consciousness well with their harmony to the 20 in the line 3, self-awareness, or through the 57 in the 3, acuteness. They learn to recognize very quickly in their life that it is possible to say things, but not necessarily possible to live them out. They see that very early on. They recognize within themselves that their behavior is very important. But no matter how much they want to be able to behave perfectly, they always run into obstacles because they end up being conditioned by the people around them, people they are dependent on. Even the words can only come out if there is a connection to the 20, and the awareness can only guide it if there is a 57, and the energy is only there if there's a 34. 6 lines look to the whole circuit, but the first thing a 10 in the line 6 looks at is integration. It says, how can I maintain the holiness of myself? How can I guarantee my survival in the world? How can I be me? How can I do what is right for me to do in the world? And all of that ends up being dependent on so many other beings. So many of these seductive sounding lines are really not what they appear to be. Can you imagine having this line? It is built into you as a mechanism that you must always be the right example. You must always be behaving correctly. Everybody is watching you, and if you don't behave correctly, you're going to feel absolutely awful. And you have to know what the correct behavior is because there are so many different situations. The exaltation, the constant example that refocuses the complacent on the basic integrity of set behavior, the enduring value of the expression of the self through action rather than words. They know how important behavior is. If you have a parent with gate 10 in the 6th line, you'll discover that while they're picking their own nose, they're going to tell you, do not pick your nose, it's bad behavior. The 10-6, they recognize correct behavior is very important. What is frustrating is that because they know that better than anyone else, and because so often they can't live it out, they would rather not be seen at all. They would rather sit up on top of the roof and not be anyone's example, because even though they can be hypocritical, they suffer a great deal from their own hypocrisies. 6 lines start off being a martyr. As we've been going through these lines, I've mentioned how 6 lines have their 3rd line phase in the early part of their life. And if you look at any 6th line, you can see they start off as the martyr and they end up being a role model. That's why understanding role gates is so important. The hermit can end up being the heretic. The chameleon becomes the opportunist. It's built into all of these mechanisms. It's just a formula. The 6th line, when it's young, goes through its martyr process, sees that its behavior is constantly being challenged, and is uncomfortable with it because it can't be a role model if its behavior is constantly being challenged. And it takes the martyr complex and its angry exile stuff, and it goes up on the hill and says, I'm not going to be an example to anyone. And then it begins its long track towards wisdom. By watching the behavior around them, by beginning to see what is real behavior. That behavior has to be in the action. It has to come out. It must manifest or generate. Otherwise, it means nothing. The collective does that all the time. They tell us to be and do things that they are not. And the individual knows that this is not possible, that if you cannot be what you say you are, if you cannot be yourself, then it's all pointless. This is a gate of individuality with the chemistry of melancholy. And there will be moments of great sadness, periods of great sadness in how behavior does and does not work. And remember that the 10-6 is going to be subject to the definition and type and authority of their own nature. Otherwise, you don't know how it's possibly going to come out. And it's a lot easier for a 10-6 that is connected to a motor that goes to the throat or is connected to the sacral to begin to be what they say they're going to be, to learn that, because they have the opportunity to bring all of that together. But if you have a 10-6 with no access to a motor, your ability to turn your words into action is going to mean that you have to know so clearly the nature of the other. And it's never going to work unless you are entering in correctly according to your design. In the detriment, we have the hypocrite. Do as I say, not as I do. Behavior restricted to words rather than action. We have seen this as a gift in all 6 lines. You know, the 40 in the line 6 sits on top of the house, looks at its family and says, yeah, I can see who's messing up there. They can easily point it out. The 10 in the line 6 has this deep capacity to point out to you what is correct behavior. Ra used to tell people with this line, go ahead, tell other people how to behave. It's part of your gift. Don't feel self-conscious because you yourself can't act the way you tell other people to act. Everybody has to accept their limitations, whatever it happens to be. One harmony to this 10 in the line 6 is the 20 in the line 6, to the line of wisdom. This is an enormous potential here to be awake to the beauty of self. But it's not an easy process. And in the end, it all comes down to the same thing. It comes down to how you live in the world. The only action that matters is that you are not taken away from your nature. And as long as you are not taken away from your nature, you're an example for others. This is the great value of the 10th gate. And as an example for others, you are a source of wisdom for them in their lives. The other thing Ra used to tell people with gate 10 in the line 6 in detriment, he'd say, don't be a hypocrite. Don't pretend that you do what you say you're going to do. Just tell other people what to do and save yourself the grief. Because, of course, that's just as valid or all. We know the importance of the 6 as a role model line, where the rest of the hexagram can come to it, other than just to the 5. Comes to the 6 for confirmation. So as long as it recognizes its mechanic, it doesn't have to get caught up in all of those negative attributes of it. But of course, that's true of all lines. Some of these lines become overwhelming for beings because they're not aware of their mechanics. They don't understand how they work, and as such, they get totally blown out of all proportion. At the end of this process of going through the lines together, you're really going to have a solid insight into structure, because that is what all this is about. And in grasping structure, you can look clearly at anything in the chart. You can see it. You can always be guided to the nature of a line by its structure and by these various role gates or profiling gates that we can use that help guide us with the keynotes. And when you get to the point where you can sit above and see the behavioral field, you can prevent people from stepping into behavioral patterns that will be detrimental to them. You can be their guide. That next step from here is into the logic process, and it's into the process of challenging the collective authority. Think about that. From the moment that the real behavior, the example of behavior can be established in the individual as a mutative force, it goes directly to the 58th gate to influence the energy that challenges collective authority, the collective behavior. Of all the 6 lines that we've looked at, none makes a more beautiful turn of the wheel than the 10-6 does as it goes into the 58-1. It goes to the joyous, and it goes to the most beautiful line of all of the 384. The 58-1 is the line of love of life. In the end, the 10-6 must find for itself love of life and the vitality that comes from loving life. It is not the vitality that creates the love of life. It is the love of life that creates the vitality. The 10-6 sits up there and knows the correct behavior, but it also knows that that behavior is what brings about the love of life. And out of that love of life comes the power to correct the collective, comes the power to establish new patterns, comes the power to release the example in the world. You are unique. You have no choice. Love yourself. There is nothing else. Truly, there is nothing else. The 15 in the line 6 is called self-defense. This is the grounding. On the roof of the house, you can begin to see the 6 lines carry a unique quality, particularly in our time. You know, that is, not only do they represent this finishing process of being able to look upon the hexagram and to be clear about where the hexagram truly can fulfill itself, but the 6th line also represents an openness to a mutative sequence that is in essence taking place as an ongoing evolutionary process, and something that opens one up through 6 lines to the completion of our process, the completion of our evolution. Mercury moves into gate 5 today at 15:34. This is the sacral gate of fixed rhythms, the gate of waiting. And we saw when the sun transited here not so long ago that this is all about habits and rituals. And we learned that if you have this gate activated in your design, you should never let anyone take you away from your fixed rhythms, from your habits and rituals, because they keep you healthy. The moon is still in gate 57 since 1:52 this morning, the individual splenic gate of intuitive insight. And so we still have the channel of perfected form for a little while longer. At 13:19, the moon moves into gate 32, still in the splenic center. This is the tribal gate of duration, of continuity, telling us that the only thing that endures is change. And the last moon gate today is gate 50. Still in the tribe here, although it's defense now rather than ego. And this is the gate of values, the cauldron, where those beings or ideas of projects that were created in the 59-6 and nurtured in the 27 are given a good set of values to set them on the path to maturity. So that is the end of gate 10. Tomorrow, as we move into gate 58, we also move into Christmas Day. So 58 is the gate of the joyous, the gate of aliveness. I look forward to seeing you then. Go gently.